Hello friends, this is Akul Mike Live and I'm your host Chandrakant. Today we are discussing about the climate change and it's a big subject, it's on everybody's mind, and we are actually trying to see how we can improve the climate and make sure that the humankind takes all the right step. And because of that there are some protests also brewing in different parts of the countries, and we have seen the effects of the climate change recently. To discuss this matter, I will be joined by a very senior person from UK. Friends, don't go anywhere. I will just take a very short break and join back along with my friend. Welcome back, friends, and I'm very honored and pleased to have Mr. Mike Bradley on the show. Mike is joining us from UK, and we will have a very good discussion about the climate change. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Good afternoon to you, Chandra. Trust you're well. Enjoying the weather. Improving a bit.
Good afternoon, Mike. I think it's a great monsoon season going on here in our country, and talking about monsoon, I think the rains actually created such a big havoc across the world. I mean, it used to happen in India always. It's like a common news, and every season there'll be a lot of catastrophes and landslides and sinkholes. It's like way of life here. But why this has become such a big news now, since it happened in Europe, it happened everywhere else, and then there are a lot of wildfires across North America. So certainly climate is changing, and even before we start the discussion, there is a comment from Mr. Syed Hussain, who is very happy that we are talking about climate. So Syed, thank you so much for your comment, and if you have any specific question, do shoot on and we will respond to you. So moving on, Mike, what is your opinion on this climate change?
Well, of course, we all have to take notice. Now is a time for us all to act, that's for sure. I think, it's abundantly obvious that things are happening on a global scale. We cannot keep going the way we were pre-pandemic. Over the pandemic, a lot of us realized that maybe commuting wasn't something we all have to do. We can actually work from home, and that's better for the environment. And I remember pictures of Mumbai with no traffic on the roads. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. So what we have seen over the pandemic is that things can be done differently. And what is for sure is, if we're going to arrest the chaos that we're seeing around the world, we have to do something different. So we cannot keep going the way we are. However, in the UK for the next 2 weeks, we have a group called Extinction Rebellion. If you do a hashtag on Twitter, you'll see that's already a trending subject in the UK for sure. I don't know if globally, but Extinction Rebellion's campaign is based on civil disobedience and business disruption, according to their own mantra. They want to challenge the status quo on climate and the ecological crisis. I think that's absolutely right. I don't, however, think it's right that there should be civil disobedience and business disruption. I don't actually think that actually is the way to move forwards in a positive way. I don't think any of our global economies can cope with that. I think it's an ideological dream or nightmare, I should say, and therefore we need to take a different approach. We need to take a more responsible approach to solving the climate environmental crisis.
I think you're making a lot of sense. I think that is the way to go. Coming back to climate changes, I think it has not happened yesterday. It is thousands of years of doing, and it seems to be a normal occurrence. The climate, especially the atmosphere, keeps to increase the carbon dioxide, etc. But this time it is because of the human activity. But surprisingly, because during the COVID period, the climate actually recovered quite a bit. the wildlife and the climate, etc., because people were not interfering in that. So at this point in time, doing a rebellion is counterproductive, because the way of life has changed already and is also changing. Maybe it will have a permanent way of life going forward in this decade. So the agitation for climate has the form of agitation must also change, because people are now working from home, they are not driving around, there is electric revolution, unconventional power generations are being promoted rather than the thermal power or nuclear power. So I think the environment is changing very, very rapidly, and therefore the rebellion, or as you said, rebellion is one of the trending hashtag today. It has to find its new method of driving their point. Don't you think so, Mike?
Yeah. I agree. I think there's in all things there's a balance to be struck, and one of the demands, shall we say, of this Extinction Rebellion is to stop investment in fossil fuels. I don't actually think that is the way to totally solve the problem, because it's not just fossil fuels that are causing the problem. I believe that it's the way that we are, on 4 levels, the way we are interacting with the environment. So there's an individual level. Do we still walk around houses and leave lights on? That's not good for the environment. That's not good for the resources of the planet. We all need to be prudent of that. There's the corporate business side of being responsible for the planet. Are we corporately making the right decisions, taking account of the ecological impact of what we're doing? There's the public and country level, where this, I think, also includes the political power plays. A swing back to traditional pre-pandemic commuting is not something to be encouraged. We, as you rightly say, in the pandemic, we saw how the environment improved when we stopped commuting. So let's ensure that countries are working towards an efficient way of allowing people to work, which doesn't go back to the old pre-pandemic, let's pollute the planet and burn it up, because that isn't going to continually work. And then I think there's a collective responsibility, and by that I mean there's a multinational, multilateral approach. It is no good 1/3 of the world deciding to do something and 2/3 of the world deciding they're not going to do something. We've all got to take responsibility, and I think all 4 of those levels, it's very much around being prudent, being aware, being conscious, being good stewards of the environment. And in some way, those 4 different levels, there's a personal element and there's an external, well, if you're not going to do it for yourself, we're going to find a way to make you actually be more environmentally conscious. Now, what I do think is also important, a lot of talk around electric vehicles. I don't necessarily think electric vehicles are the solution for everything. For a start, a lot of countries are already struggling with lack of electricity. So putting everybody into electric vehicles isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. Cutting out transportation, cutting out the reason to travel, reducing the amount of time that we each individually sit in a vehicle, that is actually going to have a bigger impact than, in my view, electric vehicles in the short term. The way that we produce the electric vehicle batteries, I believe, is also inefficient. So electric vehicles aren't necessarily the way to go. I do, however, think alternative natural sources of energy, they are to be encouraged. So whether it be solar, whether it be wind, whether it be hydro, we have to utilize natural resources much more efficiently. You could say that fossil fuels are natural resources, but actually what we need to do is be more prudent about what we're doing. And for me, this comes down to what I call the big three green goals. So in each one of those four categories, individual, corporate, public, country level, collectively, we have to be conscious of focusing on the big three things that we as an entity impact the climate negatively on. And if we work on those big three things, then the chances are we'll make a bigger impact faster. We do have to make a big impact. On that, I agree with Extinction Rebellion. What I don't agree with is civil disobedience and business disruption as a way to do it, particularly when every economy is on its knees already because of COVID. So what we have to do is find a sensible way to do it. So if each one of those four categories could look at their own consumption pattern and say, well, actually, the bulk of our pollution or climate impact is, let's say, commuting. Well, then let's find a way to revolutionize commuting. If it's the way we process chemicals in our factories, then let's look at a way that we can do that better. If it's the way we manufacture goods, let's look at ways we can do that better using alternative sources of power. If it's wastage, let's find ways to reduce the amount of waste. But I think every one of those four categories can look at the big three. Don't worry about the other minutiae because they're not going to make fast enough impact. Look at the big three climate impacting areas in your entity, whether it be a country, whether it be a public organization, whether it be a corporate, whether it be individual, and whether it be multinational globally, the G7, etc. Because those are the things that are going to have the biggest impact.
Very rightly pointed out, Mike. And in fact, viewers, this program is going live across the world. And whichever corner of the world you are, you can communicate with us, post your questions on any comments using the chat function in your social media. So any social media, we are going live on all of them. So, since we are global, Mike, I think the question that I need to ask is the almost like 40% to 45% population resides in India and China. These two countries may be doing something, but I think, why don't you tell us what the people think about greenhouse gas emission back there in your own country, which is UK? How people want to lead life going forward in order to reduce their the carbon footprint and become green. Is there a thinking way ahead among people?
I think it varies. I think it varies by generation, Chandra. I think younger people, Gen Zs and people like that, they will grow up thinking environmental consciousness. They have a future for the next, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they are going to be negatively impacted. So, the Greta Thunbergs of this world, they have a vested interest in ensuring things are sorted. Unfortunately, I think some of the people at the apex of organizations and countries are tinkering around the edges. Some are doing it for political gain. I saw a local councillor on the television the other night boasting about the fact that they put a cycling lane in, which has slowed down all the traffic because cycling is deemed to be better for the environment. It was a very arrogant stance. It was a very stupid stance because what's happened is the 92% of motoring traffic has now been slowed down, meaning their journeys are longer. The cycling lanes remain empty 21 hours a day. So how does, reducing the amount of potential for motoring traffic to go faster, how does that positively impact the traffic? So that's a politician who's actually taking on board a trendy term, let's all go cycling. But if you've got to cycle 50 miles to do a job, that isn't very practical. So, there's got to be a reality check. And so all this, propaganda and jumping on the trends isn't the way to go. I do believe the way to go, like I said, is for each one of those four, individuals, corporates, public, country level, and collectively as a globe, we have to take it seriously, and we have to ensure that we look at the big three that are massively impacting our own individual footprints, our own entity footprint. That is the only way to actually do this. I think there is a general move now. There is a general acceptance that the climate has changed or is changing. Some people would say, well, that's natural, it's changing anyway. Some people would blame climate change on environmental abuse. But what we have to ensure is that these extremes do not take the collective eye off the ball. What we have to do is all take it seriously and all work towards minimizing our environmental impact. Things are changing. I feel that one of the most worrying parts is that the ice caps are melting. Once they go, there is probably little chance in us being able to counteract that. The impact is going to be ginormous. So we do have to act. Like I say, I do agree with Extinction Rebellion. We've got to do something. What I do think we need to do is do it in a responsible and collective manner, rather than seeking to, cause businesses further disruption and chaos when they're already struggling to repay their COVID loans and et cetera, et cetera. That isn't going to help anybody. It's certainly not going to help the Gen Zs coming through and the millennials who are actually going to need these businesses to provide them with jobs and income and ways to live.
Well, Mike, we have a question from a viewer, and she has actually joined in from Facebook. Her name is Kanchan Verma, and she says, time has come to switch to electric vehicle, and in England as well, and England should be working towards environment conservation when it comes to transport management. I think that's really her question is, is England working towards adapting the electric vehicle transport system for better environment conservation? Your answer, Mike.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think electric vehicles are necessarily the solution to the problem. I think the biggest solution is to actually get traffic off of the roads, ensure that only essential traffic is using the roads. That means we need to be conscious of traffic flows, because there is still going to be a power requirement for electric vehicles. And electric vehicles, if you are like me, based on the south coast with that nice, beautiful beach nearby, trying to get up to somewhere in the north of England, whether it be for personal or for business reasons, you cannot do it in an electric vehicle. So electric vehicles aren't yet, in my opinion, able to handle every situation. So expecting everybody to go electric is not going to work. And England is a relatively small country. So it may be possible to go from Cardiff to Birmingham, or Birmingham to Norwich, or Birmingham to York, or Birmingham to take Birmingham because it's in the middle. It's obvious that it's going to be easier to reach with an electric vehicle if you're going from Birmingham. But if you're living at the extremes of the country, electric vehicles are not going to work. Expecting everybody to go electric, not practical. The logistics industry, potentially, as new technologies emerge, more natural-based technologies, solar energy, wind energy, some ways to harness that effectively. I don't think electric is necessarily the way to go. But I also do agree that we need to reevaluate and continually review our transport policy, and we need to ensure that we're concentrating on traffic flow, not blockage, because that's not going to help the environment. And we need to focus on getting traffic off of the roads wherever possible. And there should be fiscal policies that encourage that. I don't know if that's answered that lady's question. No doubt, there's going to be not necessarily agreement there. I wouldn't expect there to be. I think these things are up for debate. I think we've got to be practical and not ideological, because ideological will not get us where we need to be.
Well, Kanchan, hopefully your question was answered. If not, you are most welcome to post your additional question. No problem with that. So Mike, let me share my personal experience. I started riding bicycle about 7-8 years back, and initially it was quite tough. Even 1 or 2 kilometers used to be very tough, but then gradually I picked up this stamina, and I was riding almost like 50 kilometers a day, going to office, coming back, and then there were other people in my group. There were guys who were riding 50 kilometers one way, so about 80 to 90 kilometers in a day. And there were other nerds, and these nerds are not necessarily junior guys. These are the CEOs and really creme de la creme, who were riding almost like 150 kilometers for a cup of tea. They used to plan it, hey, let's go there and let's have a cup of tea in that particular joint, and they ride 150 kilometers. So what I'm trying to say is that even though England or UK is a smaller country, not as big as India, what I know about UK is that if you drive 80 kilometers in either direction, you will hit the ocean. So which is so small compared to what figures I'm trying to share with you. So if you practice, and if you put a small electric motor, then you can actually reduce your exertion and still go green. And
I think exertion isn't the problem. I think exertion isn't the problem, Chandra. I think the problem is practicality. If you're going along a street, and let's say, we need to look at the whole picture. The whole picture means that if you're needing to go 50 kilometers to the office, do you need to go 50 kilometers to the office every day? Or could you go work? Well, could you work from home? Could you work locally in a local work hub where you collect together with other people in your area, and only occasionally maybe you do your 50 kilometer cycle? However, I every time I see cycles on UK streets, we haven't got the width. That one of the problems of having a small country is we haven't actually got the road width available to put cycles there and motor vehicles on the same side of the road. So what I see time and time again, so you see maybe 3 to 4 cyclists, and they will be riding at the edge of the road, meaning no vehicles can overtake them. So whilst it's great because those 4 cyclists are actually not burning any fuel for the environment, maybe a bit of methane if they've had to have steak for breakfast, but then the rest of the travelling public is held up behind them, and their journey is longer. So as I said before, cycling in and of itself is not the solution. Getting traffic off the roads that doesn't need to be there, that's a solution. Allowing people to work locally or work from home or work remotely 80% of their time, that's part of the solution. Having traffic flowing properly is part of the solution. That might mean contraflows, which means in the morning going into town, there are 2 lanes and 1 lane going out, and the other way around in the evenings. So that I saw that in Rio on the Copacabana road, where in the mornings, two traffic lanes went towards town and 1 came out, and they reversed that in the evening. That was sensible management of traffic. I think traffic flow is key to reducing consumption. I think reducing the amount of unnecessary commuting is key to it. I'm not saying cycling may not be part of the solution. If you're working in a place that you can get to by cycle, good on you. If you can walk it, good on you. If you can't, you shouldn't be condemned. But also the organisations, be they corporate or public, need to also be conscious that maybe part of their big three green goals is to reduce the amount of time people have to commute into their office unnecessarily.
Yes, I think it's a very large subject, Mike. We can circle back on this subject in future and discuss specifically how you can adapt the electric revolution. But for today, I think let's get back to our discussion about the rebellion. So what is your opinion? What's going on in terms of the environmental rebellion which is brewing up? And I think it's mostly happening in the UK. What really is happening over there?
Well, that just cause chaos, basically. Their objective is to raise the profile of their issue. And at the moment, their big issue is stop investment in fossil fuels. I don't necessarily, like I said earlier, don't think that's necessarily the solution. Not everybody can go electric. So more efficient use of fossil fuels, there should be investment in. Maybe instead of using, 3 gallons, 20 litres, they should be working on trying to use 1 gallon and 10 litres. That would be an investment in fossil fuels, but it would be an investment which says let's see how we can do this more efficiently. So I don't think stopping investment is the way to go. I do think, however, investing in more efficient use of fossil fuels is possibly a better agenda. I never see the point in civil disobedience. I think we're all fully aware that something needs to be done. I don't think causing chaos in cities is the way to help anybody, least of all the public who are trying to sort of get back on their feet after COVID. And I do, however, hope that, and there's already the big summit coming up, which Alok Sharma is organising, I think, in Glasgow at the end of the year. So there is focus within Westminster to try and improve things. Extinction Rebellion doesn't need to raise that. What we do collectively need to do is accelerate our approach and our prudent approach to solving the climate crisis. And like I say, for me, that's the big 3 green goals. Each one of those 4 categories needs to examine that, come up with it, and if they won't do it, then maybe that's where the governments need to step in and say, look, if you can't self-regulate, we're going to make you look at the top 3 things in your organisation that could have a positive impact on the climate.
Well, I think the world has really changed, especially if I have to talk about India. The noise pollution has come down because people are not riding their vehicles on the street. The water pollution has come down because we are not creating so much dump into the rivers and oceans as we were earlier. The air pollution has come down because we are not using driving around unnecessary for small things, which was the norm. You want to have a cup of tea somewhere, just drive around. Instead, now just ask your friend to come online on some sort of digital conference and have you bring your coffee and you have your coffee together. So I think the lifestyle is changing, and because of that, the reason for rebellion must also change. I think our appeal to the people who are fighting for a good cause must look at this as well and make sure that the civil disobedience is also changed along with the time. So with this, we can end our discussion, Mike. Unless you have any last words, I will just ask you if you want to add something in the end.
No, I think we've got to all work collectively and positively together to create change. We've got to do it in a way that's prudent, and we've got to do it in a way that enables us to continue doing what we have to do to put food on the table and roofs over our heads. And therefore, we need to do it in a way that is embracing the democratic process, not trying to usurp it.
Thank you so much, Mike, for finding time and discussing about this very important subject. We'll catch up with you next week once again on something more interesting. Bye-bye for today.
Look forward to it. Take care. Thank you, Chandra. Bye.